The following episode discusses suicide, suicidal ideation, and abuse. Listener discretion is advised.
I just wanted to take a moment to preface this episode with a disclaimer out of respect for anyone mentioned in my story. What I discuss with Matt and Ashleigh is a candid conversation based on my personal experience, opinions, and feelings. I mean absolutely no disrespect for anyone else involved. Honestly, I have a great deal of love for the entire family and for each group of people that have touched my life throughout this experience. Thank you for listening.
The World Tomorrow. The Worldwide Church of God presents Herbert W. Armstrong.
And I'm here to bring you the truth, because you don't hear this from any other voice. No one else is telling you the things that God is telling you through me. He's speaking through me.
We must not judge what God is most surely doing. Right now, there are no coincidences. Everything has a meaning and is an opportunity to learn to be faithful by being obedient, even when it's uncomfortable.
Those of you that have not surrendered to God to really be obedient to Him, you don't agree very far with me, do you? Of course you don't. You can't. You're carnal-minded. And the carnal mind is enmity against God. The carnal mind is hostile toward God.
The Lord let me experience what it is to be a new bride. You know, I'm not worried about what I'm about to say, though it may be graphic. We're coming to the Lord, and if you can take it, beyond the veil is the chamber. That's the wedding chamber. The Lord told me that.
Welcome back to the Cult Next Door podcast. We are joined again by our brother-in-law, Blake. We kind of ran out of time yesterday. I think we recorded for a total of about 7 hours, but you know, this is such a big story and complex storylines that it's impossible to get all of that in a day. I mean, we've talked about this before, but you know, we could talk about our story forever until the day we die and not get everything out. But we had some things we wanted to touch on that, Ashleigh had some questions from where we left off yesterday. So I'll just kind of let her take it from there and we can jump right back in.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
So as you were talking, there were questions that were popping up for me, and for the sake of time, I didn't interject those questions. But, you know, there was no courtship when I was growing up. That all started as a result of what happened with me and my marriage. I'm super curious. Like, I don't actually know. I don't think anyone in the family has really laid out what a courtship looked like for you guys to me. And so I thought, if I'm interested to know these details, probably the listeners are interested as well. So when you were told that you could court, what does that actually mean? What did that entail over that month period?
Okay, good question. Unfortunately, the answer is varied, right? Because after you, what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 quote unquote courtships / gauntlet trials through hell, each different in their own way. They all went differently. I guess it's typical with narcissism. Again, I'm not an expert. I've done my YouTube education research for, a few weeks, a year or two, but it's typical to have like shifting, what's the word? Arbitrary standards according to the leader's whim, right? Like his mood for the day and what's serviceable to. I don't know. Honestly, I don't understand everything that goes into it, but I know that there's not a consistent standard. That's one of the things that blew our mind, that when things started devolving so much, proceeding immediately, like leaving Crusade Church, was, wait a minute, you're taking some very like long-standing standards and teachings here, and now they're just different. Like you just are deciding you can do this, this, and this. So like I'm losing the term, but man, I forget it. But Point is it was different every time. And so I can only speak most accurately with an imperfect memory to mine. But I know that preceding mine, there was a courtship, would have been the first one after you left years and years later, but it was incredibly stringent and strict. And I had only, like, it started just before I moved to Arkansas, and then was like midway, like very beginning, like midway through-ish, like getting towards like the last half, somewhere in that ballpark when I moved here. Like that weekend, I think maybe there was a group outing for the purpose of this courtship. So like, I don't know. I know there was a stringent list of rules and everything's controlled, right? Which is just the case in the church.
Which that means that you didn't know what to expect, and you were somewhat off balance going into this.
Honestly, what I knew to expect stemmed only from the effect that the book I Kissed Dating Goodbye had on the church by Joshua Harris, which is a whole other interesting story where he went in the long run with that, but let's don't go there. I was familiar with that book and knew the impact it was having. I did not know your history with what was going on. That was such a mystery for almost a decade. And I remember, I don't know if this was before the first courtship or during or right after, but I remember like seminar, like nightly, not nightly, but like a middle of the week night Bible study type, maybe it was a Sabbath service, I can't remember, on like, these are like what courtship is about. Like, this is the financial standard you must meet as a man wanting to court someone. It was like, you have to own your home, or if you're renting, have like $3,000 to $5,000 in the bank. And like, there were lots of specific standards. Like, you must, request permission from the girl's father and, or the pastor, then the father, or something like that. I don't remember all the rules. I just know that there was a seminar about it, and I remember I'm wrong about the first courtship. That would have been Sarah with somebody before me. Failed courtship gone wrong, right? And I can't speak to all the details there. I think that was pretty strict, right?
Yes.
And that the seminar that I remember being a young person, like just having entered this church, I'm pretty sure, unfortunately for him, that he was used as kind of an example of like, don't screw this up, and this up. This is not how you go about stuff. And like, like how that's used in this environment, like people are going to be publicly shamed. Like there's going to be an example of you. An example was made out of you, right? And to just like carry that across time. So... I
know this person that courted her to begin with, I've talked to him extensively about his story, and I don't want to tell his story.
I would really like to talk to him personally for the record if he's listening.
Yeah. But it was, according to him, extremely high control. And as far as, finances go and where you're supposed to be in your bank account, I mean, it was expected that your bank statements were going to be showed.
I was relieved when that was not asked of me, because I expected it.
I was going to ask you if you had to provide proof.
I expected it. I thought it was coming. And thankfully for me, he had just like really abandoned a lot of the stringent standards when I came along. I don't know exactly why. Like we were saying yesterday about my dad, like him trusting or respecting him or not, like what's behind that? Like at the feast, like he would turn messages over to him visiting and things. I feel like there's a little something unique possibly at the heart of that with my family. Like I remember when he told Sarah and I that we could court, and we knew each other. He was like, Blake's been in this faith since he was a kid. We know his family. You guys have worked together. You know each other. Just ask the big tough questions about marriage, like be about a month courtship, and then we can talk about the engagement. We can proceed. Like it was almost a done deal, which sounds like, I had it really good and great, and I'm thankful for that. But it still came with its level of challenge, which is not funny. But so I think maybe there might be something to like the connection with my family. Like your dad would talk about my dad and like my family and like how precious they were to the congregation, like they didn't live there. It was just me. So I don't really understand his head on that. I mean, what can I say as to what's going on with him? But I feel like there was a level of relaxation, whatever, when it came to me. I think some of it, like we were talking about this before we started, right? Some of it probably comes down to, like, take the example he made out of you, right? Like, he tried to get you to come back cowering to him, like, what do I have to do? Like, I'm giving this up. Like, let me repent. Let me earn your good graces again. I think, I could be wrong according to someone else's perspective, but I think it must have been that Sarah and I proved we were under his control. Like, we were not erring way outside the lines. Like, we developed the potential for some romantic feelings and expressed it, and then, hell no, this is not happening. And
according to, or from what it looked like, you still held on to the faith.
Yes.
The year after
Yes.
he said no and crushed you both.
Yes. I can remember after the fact being told, like, a year later that he's seeking out inside information on, like, my state of things, like, from my roommate, who's an elder in the church, like, asking, like, how, like, where I stood with things. And I remember his answer being something like, I mean, like, he's falling apart, like it's tearing him up, but, like, he's willing, like, to let this go, to surrender it to the Lord. And, like, he might be suicidal. Like, literally that feast, like, I went climbing over the edge of this mountain off the bluff at the feast site that we were at. And it, like, no gear, like, kind of like bouldering, mountaineering. Like, I'm talking steep, 500 foot, that bluff, like the sunrise, sunset bluff or whatever. And I remember thinking, going over it, that, like, this is unsafe, but I don't care if I die. Like, I remember, and I almost couldn't get back. Like, I slipped a couple times getting back up, trying to climb back up. And then I rethought whether or not I wanted to live or die. Because then the fear hit, like, shoot, I'm about to fall. And then, like, the self-preservation kicks in. Like, I don't say that to be dramatic, but that happened at that feast about a year later. And so it's not too long after that things were permitted, like a month maybe. And so I remember walking the woods at that feast, and my roommate, like, counseling with me, commiserating with me over, like, how hard a time I was having, like, letting this go, and that it was killing me. But, like, I'm whatever choice do I have but surrender, right? Like, I'm under God's authority and pastor's authority, and, like, I mean, this is God's will. Like, I'm, like, you're not questioning that what's being done to you is wrong. I mean, it feels wrong. It feels terrible, but you're not questioning that. You're on board spiritually. And
also, how much was it said that we were going to suffer in this life?
Oh, yeah. This is just part of it. Suffering, whole nother topic for a podcast episode, you guys. Let's talk about the prevalence of suffering. It's one of the biggest struggles I have today, sorting through disbelieving stuff from my past and what do I believe now. Is just like, you
believe you have to suffer, need to suffer,
embrace
deserve
it.
To suffer.
You should almost love it.
Yeah.
I mean, the Bible's got scriptures that you point to, like, count it all joy. But, I mean, it's tough. Like, it's a tough doctrine to wrestle through. I wish it wasn't there. Let's just be honest about it. I wish that suffering, like, there were no suffering. So, the rules, right? So, I think my assumption on it is that Sarah and I proved we're submissive to the authority here. You took this away, you're in control, and yes, sir, like, hit me again. Like, what's, whatever. Like, this is how it is. Like, we're not gonna run off. Like, he lost you, we didn't lose us. Like his control holds.
Right. And the previous person who had courted Sarah did eventually leave because of how hellish his life was made.
Well, can I say I also almost did?
Yeah.
And Sarah wanted to, if not for the fear that it means you're going to hell. Like, you get that fear, right?
Of course, yeah.
Like, you experienced that.
Oh, yeah.
Man,
and the whole time after I was gone, I was like, that might have been the wrong thing. I might be totally, like, unredeemable now.
I don't like to admit it, but last year, after having moved away and, like, I'm done with this church, like, I'm done with abusive, narcissistic leadership, and, like, maybe I can't join another church. literally, like, the thought can still cross your mind. What if he was right? And like, now I'm on the outs. You know what I mean? Like that can still creep in. Like, I think it takes a lot to undo that. Anyway,
It does.
so I think we proved is my theory. I'm not saying we're special or got all this right by any means, but I think that we proved we're toeing the party line. Like, yes, sir. And that then there's more details to get into there, right? Like some of the stuff going on behind the scenes. But why exactly he thinks now it's okay, except that that's some twisted form of the control. Is like, oh, yep, took that away. And like you and Sarah were talking a couple days ago, right? About like Michael being a little boy and like, you're not behaving exactly how you want. I'm taking all of your toys.
Oh, I know. He was
and
so
then
little.
maybe I'll dole one back out to you here and there. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, we're not going to get into parenting here and parenting style and punishment and all of that's a whole nother topic, unless you want to. But, you know, like, no, I'm in control. You can't have it. It's like, oh, okay, maybe I'll give it. Like, you want to be grandiose? I mean, if as a narcissist, I guess you want to be loved too, right? So at some point, this is just all on your whim. You're like, okay, today it's okay now. It wasn't. Like, before it was going to tear the church apart, but now it's okay. I don't know where he's coming from on this stuff, to be honest, but it was. And then so, like I said, everyone was different. So the courtship immediately preceding ours, about a few years, very, very strict regulations. And I was only privy to, like, I just moved here and didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. But I remember it was like you could only go out with like all of the some other people from the church in a public place, and can't do this. Like, it was strict, right? Mm-hmm. I think it was like previously discussed, like where you can propose and that sort of thing. So then I come along and for whatever reason, he's decided we almost don't even need one. It's a formality. We're almost ready to get married as is. So let's do a month, ask the questions. And the courtship, if I remember correctly, because we worked together, he said that, I mean, you're together all week. I mean, you could talk about this stuff while you're at work. I mean, I think there was a list of questions that we were supposed to have for one another, like to sort through as a married couple.
That
like
he wrote?
I don't know if there was a book that had some, or we were supposed to get our own. I remember coming up with some of my own. I remember wanting to discuss how you deal with the toothpaste. Like, do you crush this roll or do you flatten it out and like want to roll it up? Because this could be a point of contention. Sarah and I are both OCD.
Yeah.
We're both a little funny.
You just have your own tubes of toothpaste.
We do.
Okay.
There you go. I don't even know that we do it differently, but we have separate bathrooms now. Like, I have my own bathroom. Yeah. Anyway, not because there was contention, just because it's convenient.
The toothpaste situation was so contentious.
It's just funny. I wanted to talk about it. Like, it's stupid now, right? But I was like, we got to talk about everything that could be a problem.
Yeah.
For me, that mattered. Oh, boy, there were so many more things to talk about that you never know. Yeah. Anyway, I remember we were supposed to have a list of questions. I don't know if I think one was given to us that we were supposed to build on. I'm not sure. But, and we were supposed to be like visible, like in a room off of the lunchroom at lunch during Sabbath services, or at work in the public place, and we could be talking about these things. Like, that's what happens. Get to the end of that, and I remember like the month had gone by, and I'm like, we did it.
I'm sorry. It wasn't like you had only specific times that you could meet and talk, because I know that's how it was before. But since you worked together,
because we worked together, it threw a big wrench in that. It would have been more regulated, I guess, if that weren't the case. But we were literally already spending several hours a day together.
What about phone calls?
That was okay. Like, I remember asking, because I think that sort of thing was very strictly regulated.
Yes.
Preceding us.
Yeah.
So I think I remember asking, like, when he told me, it was because I knew there was strictness and rules. I remember the seminar. So I remember when he told me, like, you can court. And I was like, okay, so, I mean, does that mean, like, can I call her and talk about this? You know, like, and he was like, well, after I've talked to her. Like, that was like right after he told me, and then he was going to go over to her apartment and tell her. So I remember him saying, like, yeah, I mean, you can call and talk to each other on the phone. Like, you can talk about this stuff at work and ask all the tough questions, you know, make sure that this is good, you're ready. You think you're for sure compatible. talk about it at lunch, visible, I think like with the door cracked or whatever. But I think we were in the courtyard a lot, actually, with glass doors right off the lunchroom at church on Sabbath. So we're literally talking like 4 weeks here. And so we get to the end of 4 weeks, we've done this, and like Sarah and I knew before we started, it was like, we asked all the questions, but like we were on the same page.
It's a formality?
Yes.
Really?
Like I wanted to propose. And I remember, I think I was gone home for Thanksgiving to Alabama. And I remember calling him and I was like, so I get back and like we just completed 4 weeks. I was like, I would like to propose. And he was like, well, so-and-so's visiting that weekend and it's gonna mess up like the optics. I don't want distraction or something. Like he didn't want, because church services, there has to be an announcement like so-and-so's courting now, call you up. I don't think that happened to you, did I? Remember you and Liz going up there to stand in front of the...
Yeah, I think ours was
Lucky
hush.
Yeah, y'all's was hush hush. So the preceding you, it's like you got to come up to the front out of your pew. It's like, we're going to announcement everyone in the middle before the sermon, Blake and Sarah come up here and stand right here and stand right here. And it's like, we're decided they're courting and
wow,
like, congratulations, everybody clap and your red face, like go sit back down. Like now this is a thing to watch, everyone. Let's see how this goes.
I'm imagining you guys out in the courtyard talking and just like faces peering out the glass.
It was so embarrassing. Like, I mean, it's fine, whatever. There are worse things at play happening.
Right.
But yeah, it's awkward. All of this is awkward. Talking about it is still not fun. So he tells me, it's like, no, you can't propose now. And I remember like freaking out. It's like, he's changed his mind. Like he's in control, total control. Is like, said we could court for a month and then we could get engaged and now I can't. And I didn't know why. And this reason didn't make sense. It's like, well, so-and-so's visiting town and it's going to be a distraction. And I was just like, okay. And he didn't give me a for sure after they've left, then you could do it next week. I didn't know. I don't remember how I found out either. I think I had to ask him again. And he was like, yeah, next week or whatever. And then he set me down. I can't remember exactly what preceded this, but I remember him talking to me and being like, now, you see how proposals are done in the movies. There's a lot of romance and there might be a kiss afterwards. And it's like people get caught up in the feeling of it. And he was like, none of that is happening. Absolutely no romance in the proposal. He's like, you need to be in a public place where nothing could happen and blah, blah, blah. Like he's thinking like you're going to end up rolling around on the floor together because you just proposed. Yeah, that's still weird.
Like in a public place with church members present?
No, he didn't say that. He didn't say that. I took her to the lake visitor center, like where people are walking around on the bridge or whatever on a lunch break. Mm-hmm. And like people were around. But yeah, no. But there was another courtship after Matt's where, yeah, it was like you guys have gotten way too close. Hanky-panky was a term thrown around, I believe, which there was some discrepancy on what hanky-panky means, if I remember correctly. It's like, I think maybe there was a peck of a kiss, and there's like, I said no hanky-panky. It's like, well, I thought that meant something else. Yeah, so, I got off a little bit easy there.
So when you proposed, though, you weren't allowed to kiss.
No.
What about a hug?
That was a little taboo, too. Like, I had been, told.
Could you hold her hand, though? How do you put the ring on? I mean, because I know you mentioned...
I didn't ask too many specifics. Like
you had a pair of
so here's
pliers or tweezers and you just came in from the
I kind of have like the lawyer bent, like on what are the loopholes here, right? Like when I was a kid, I had a Nesquik chocolate milk habit problem. My dad regulated me once to like 1 glass of chocolate milk a day. And then I had a good buddy that introduced me to 60-ounce travel mugs from the gas station. So that became my 1 glass of chocolate milk a day. I mixed that sucker full. And my dad didn't even crush me on that one. He should have, but
he was probably like,
I think he was impressed with the ingenuity.
Yeah.
I got sick doing it. Like it would get warm. And I was drinking that all day. That's not my finest moment. Still like Nesquik. I don't buy it anymore because I can't control it. So it's a drug problem.
I'm sending that for your birthday.
I'll drink it.
Okay.
Anyway.
Like an engagement, you hold out your hand.
I put it on her finger.
Okay.
Yeah. But like I said, I'm not going to ask too many specific questions. Like I'm just going to take the rules that are given to me and follow those, right? I mean, there was a lot of control and oversight here. So I was like strictly, but to that question was where I was going with the hanky-panky situation for the last courtship gone wrong in the church. It was specifically instructed like, you guys have not been trustworthy here, so both of you sit in front of me at my desk, and then you can give her the ring, and then she can put it on her finger after that. Like you can, or put it on the desk and slide it across the desk, something like that. I'm getting a little dramatic here, but no, that happened. But with me, that didn't happen, but it was like no romance. Don't get swept up in any emotion. Which after the fact, like years later, Sarah, we're recollecting this, she was like, you're in love and you're deciding to get married. Like, of course I'm emotional, but it doesn't mean you're overrun with emotions and finding a hotel room, right? I mean, that's not just exactly what happens necessarily. So,
because heaven forbid that you would sex. That's ridiculous.
Heaven forbid that you would sex.
I mean, seriously, that being such a major focal point of everything is like, my God, we have to make sure no one touches each other.
This was not even about sex.
Or
this was like heaven forbid
in a physical
you
way.
have a kiss. Is what this was about.
I know, but they always viewed it like a slippery slope.
Oh, I know. Yeah, slippery slope.
So the
sure.
whole thing is like, what would happen? Would the sky fall down if you were to have sex? Would the whole earth implode if you touched? I mean, it's just that there's just so much.
It's a whole other element to dive into.
Trauma in purity culture. And then this was just an extreme version of purity culture. Just so incredibly damaging. And how do you make that switch? It's your wedding day. And now we get to kiss or touch hands.
There can be issues there for people, right?
And doing that in front of everyone, which I did want to ask about that as well.
Kissing.
Your wedding day and you being on display. And I specifically remember I did get invited to Jennifer's wedding, even though that was Dad's decision. At the time, the whole family is still against me.
Right.
But Dad had me come, and it was so awkward, and I won't get into that. But I remember him saying that everyone was witnessing their first kiss. Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember
Matt?
that.
Yeah.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember cringing and being like, "Ooh, that's so awkward to say that and put them on blast."
I don't think he said that with us.
Okay.
But it was true. Yep. Never kissed a girl before that. For our wedding day. So cycling back to finish answering your question then about could I hold her hand? It's like, no, couldn't be holding hands. Right. But I mean, I didn't ask, but yeah, I put the ring on her finger, but I think we hugged after. No, we didn't. I think I was afraid to because I think he was so worried about the potential romance and the feelings. Like, I don't think that we did. I think I remember the restraint being difficult. And then I think in that moment, we both felt like now it's okay to say, I love you. Whereas before that's never been said. Maybe that wasn't okay with the rules. I don't know. But we did. And then at that point, now that you're engaged, our specific rules, like I said, this varied relationship to relationship, was we were okay and trusted to go to Little Rock on a date, as long as you're in public places, like be wise, right? Like to put yourself in areas of temptation, but we were allowed to date. I remember catching some flack over that because you get a little bit swept up in it, and I think my roommate was used to inform on me that I was spending too much time on the phone and maybe too many times a week, like out on a date, which a lot of the time was actually just spent like in a coffee shop, literally planning the wedding. Yes. So I remember kind of catching some heat over not following the rules that were there strictly enough. Like how much time you can spend together, how much time you should be on the phone. Like this is going too far.
But that implies that you should just know how much time is enough time to spend on the phone before you cross the boundary into too much time,
Right.
because the rules weren't.
What couple doesn't want to spend all day
set.
on the phone together when you're in love and like you're excited and infatuated? And I mean, when is that? Like, I mean, I know uncles in my family that are still teased about the phone bill they ran up when they were dating their now wife, right? I mean, come on.
These are normal
What can
things.
happen on the phone anyway? Okay, so I think the regulations for us were so loose that when that happened and then we caught heat for that, then he had to step in and say, okay, it should only be this many dates a week and then like this long or something like that. And then there were, like in the Bible with the Israelites, now because of transgression, we're going to add some regulations and rules. Something like that happened. And I had forgotten all about this until right now. That's kind of how that fleshed out. So yeah, there's my best take for you on how courtship was set up for us. Like it was different. And then your next question was the wedding day. Oh,
well, I was curious about the wedding because you had mentioned in the previous episode that Sarah had picked out a different venue that she liked, and then Dad put the kibosh on that. Like, what were the circumstances surrounding that?
Yeah. So much control.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's crazy when you start talking about it. So let's just say it. Matt's like, just speak your truth, right? It's like the church building was a dump. Mold infested. I convinced some of us are sick from black mold exposure. I just think that we are. You could smell the mold coming from some of those front rooms near the sanctuary. Termite problems, like the roof's always leaking. Like we're making stuff look. I'm not trying to be harsh or petty here, but we're making stuff look nice by slapping stick-on floor tiles on bars and painting half a wall and then putting it.
Yeah, painting. It's an ingenious thing to do, but painting large PVC pipe to look like marble.
When I first joined, when I first came to the church, I thought that was cool. The court of King Jesus with the sword up there on the lectern and the marble pillars.
Well, it's a neat idea.
Well, you guys are so creative. Yeah. Like you definitely made a lot work out of a little.
I mean, if it were, if it had been up, this is a side note, but if it had been up to me, and Sandy and I even talked about this, like I think we brought it up to Dad, like what if we did this with the background? And that was like a quick no.
He didn't think of it.
Like a change, that wasn't what it looked like. It was tacky. Let's just kind of call it what it is. Everybody's tastes are different, but it's tacky.
And Sarah...
It wasn't for a wedding. It's just kind of awkward and weird.
Sarah's not actually like an extravagant, posh person, right? Like we're not talking about a lot of money here, but she cares about a special event. Like
elegant and
any
beautiful.
event to this day, like just having someone over for brunch, like it's going to be pretty and special, much less your wedding day.
Of course.
For crying out loud. And so she doesn't want it in the tacky church building with the 50, 100-year-old carpet that's like disgusting and the whole thing. So she doesn't want it there. We had been keeping the feast for a couple years at a camp a couple hours away and had a beautiful like sanctuary hall with like natural stone and like a lot of natural light, and she loved it.
Open, what do they call it?
Rafters, vaulted ceilings. Like, I mean, kind of like, just beautiful.
Exposed wood, like really nice.
Not extravagant beautiful, like going to some
like
$10,000 venue. Like it probably would have cost us like $500 to rent it or something, right? But she thought it was pretty. Like setting her sights very moderately here. I mean, we're talking about...
And it's kind of neutral otherwise. It doesn't have a bunch of stuff going on.
Right. Kind of a blank slate.
Yeah.
Or a giant message behind
the
altar.
And
says,
so...
What did it say?
The court of King Jesus.
Oh, that was the whole message?
I think so.
For some reason, I only remember King Jesus.
That's the biggest letters. But
okay.
So she wants to have it at this camp, not at the church. I don't know who told your dad about this, but he finds out. And I think I was with her at the gym when she got a call from him. That she might have got a call from Jen that Dad said this about that. It might have been that. But either way, I remember her sitting on the couch in the waiting room, the lobby, and getting this call and then just being like devastated that she's being taken to task over, how dare you not want to have your holy wedding in the holiest place God's ever touched. And to us, we're like, wait a minute. I thought the Bible said, and we have been led to believe in teaching our whole life, that the church is not a building. God's put his presence in his people.
It's the body.
The body of Christ. Why does the building matter? But we were very specifically being told God has performed miracles in this sanctuary. It is where his presence shows up. And we were like, wait a minute. I thought he did these miracles at the feast, at this sanctuary that I wanted to go to. It was crazy making. Like, what is it what they call it with narcissism? Like, or gaslighting.
Gaslighting.
Or like where they make you feel crazy. Like, they screw with your mind, right?
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't compute.
Right.
This is arbitrary.
Why would you want to have it anywhere else? That's what I remember. That
was
sentence
said.
being like, why, almost like, what are you thinking? Like, why would you even consider anywhere else?
But what was the angle there? Like, were there going to be other people coming in, and that would be like Dad's opportunity to showcase his church building and his church, and then
I think there's something to that. I mean, I'm speculating here, but I think there's
Yeah.
something to that. There's also something to your dad about, like, he was kind of big about place of control, like being in power. Like, he wanted to have people come over to his house. Like, he didn't really want us to do an event somewhere else, like a birthday, too much, you know what I mean? It's like he really kind of wanted people to come to him.
Yeah.
I think there's just some level of comfort in you're controlling your environment, I imagine. I'm speculating.
right.
So I don't know. But the reason given to us, which is what's the crazy part, was like, you're not pleasing the Lord here. This is this is unholy that you want to be somewhere else.
The question, why would you want to
Right.
have anywhere else? The implication is something's wrong that you would even consider.
She was shamed for wanting that.
Yeah. I
Right?
remember that being like I was surprised by that. And I knew Dad well. Like
Right.
that was like, whoa,
Like, wait a
what's
minute.
wrong with that? And like you said, it wasn't just some venue.
No.
It's where we kept the feast for a few years at that point and had these special Friday night, or I guess the
Last great
night,
day worship
the last
services.
night of the feast services and all this.
Deliverances
So
and healings.
seemed to me, looking from the outside in, at least on this, that like, well, that makes sense that he would be okay with that.
It
If
should.
this is also a special
It
place,
should've.
but it's not. Yeah.
So the actual reason behind it, we can only speculate,
Yeah.
but that was the reason given to us, right? Which, again, doesn't compute. So that was pretty heartbreaking to her. Like, you'd have to, talk to her about it, but I mean, heartbreaking.
So it wasn't
I mean,
like, I mean, I'm assuming it's not like he wanted to know, oh, why do you want to have it there and not here? It was more like, how dare you?
You're not, how dare you? It's not
Yeah.
getting questioned by a narcissist that like actually care about what you're thinking or
Exactly.
feeling here. That's not happening. So, yeah, that happened. Way too scared to make any waves about anything.
Right.
Sarah described it to me last night as being a prisoner. Like you, and I'm sure all of us kind of like, some more so than others, I guess, depending on the situation, but can assent to this feeling of you are not in control. You are just putting your head down and saying, yes, sir. Like I'm just following the steps of what I'm being told here, hoping and praying that this thing that I want doesn't get snatched away from me. This thing that I want, that kind of makes it sound.
No.
You know what I
the
mean?
thing is companionship. It's building a life with someone. It's taking care of the person that you love. I mean, yeah, there all those things were
That's one of
at
those special
stake.
things about life, right?
Of
Is
course, sharing life with someone.
Right.
Which
Right.
is like, which is good and beautiful.
Supposed to be.
Right.
So why carry all the shame over it? So, yeah, I mean, that was tough for her, like dealing with that. And yeah, it's like being a prisoner, and that I'm not calling the shots here. I'm just doing what I'm told and hoping that if I do, I make it to the finish line. Because there are some waves along the way. The boat's getting rocked by like any little thing that's, man. Yeah. That was the story on the venue.
Well, as a side note,
So we had it at the church.
like that I know what that feels like, not in exactly the same way, but with, the times where I thought I was getting the family back or some semblance or just like a little bit of a connection, there was that really shaky, uneasy feeling of
Anything
I
you do
don't
wrong,
have control over this.
anything you do wrong, and it's
he
over.
can yank this at any time.
You can do something right that can be twisted wrong, and it's over. Yeah.
Like my heart is right here in his hands, and if he squeezes,
and that's
I'm
how
dead.
Sarah had no control, or felt she had no control. I mean, because technically, here's the thing, right? You do have control of your own life, unless you're abused long enough and you're convinced that you don't, and you've surrendered it. So it's like technically we do, but you don't think that you do. You can't act as if you do.
No,
you know what I mean?
And when you're part of a system, a church or a family, and everyone is under this person's control or the system's control, then yeah, you could assert your own will, but there are severe consequences that will be had as a result. And that could mean like real serious loss, because Sarah could assert her will, and then Dad could decide, no, you can't have this.
And we would have listened. And we would have been heartbroken forever. Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
so it's not real. It's not like you had any real control over your life.
Not within the system. No, of course not.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to leave the system.
Right. But if you believe that is God's true church and where he's working, even if the leader might be flawed in certain ways.
He placed you here under this authority.
Yes.
And if you step outside of it all, you probably are condemned to hell, or maybe for certain.
And you just failed a test. Like you failed that and you didn't stay strong. So, yeah.
So she felt like she had no control.
So it wasn't control.
Right.
You don't,
so,
actually.
To this day, I want to give her a whole new wedding. Right? Like
I was actually thinking that last night. I'm like, we need to give Sarah
I know.
Like the venue of her choice, the dress of her choice, like
everything. Like do it up the way you wanted. Yeah. I'm gonna need a GoFundMe account.
Okay. All right. So Blake's Venmo
spent too much. I don't actually have a Venmo. Spent too much money on growing the company this year, so now got to recover. But yeah, to this day, I want to give her a whole new wedding because. And I know this isn't only true for us. I know it's true for other people, right? Like, man, I look at Michael and Jess, and then I don't know exactly how it felt for you, but like you want to go back and like it's just worthy of lament that one of the most special, exciting times of your life, you mainly look on it with pain and then relief that it's over. And I guess that happens to lots of people, right? I guess there's family drama with
but what you
people.
said yesterday, and I didn't interject, but it did resonate with me about like you're just trying to make sure nothing, like that it's not ripped from you before
because you know it can
you make it to the finish. Yeah,
it has been
before you make it to the finish line, because it might even be likely that it could be. Like you've been through it before, you've watched it happen.
You have every reason to believe it 50-50 at least.
I mean, you make a misstep by someone else's point of view and it's done.
Might not be an actual misstep, but perceived as a misstep, right?
And so that, when you said that yesterday, I was like, man, that really was like, you're just trying to like, let me make it. And luckily our engagements, all of us, like were relatively short, or I don't know. I mean,
you couldn't make it for too long. You couldn't be doing a 2 or 3 year engagement. You're going to screw that up.
Yeah. You're going to hold hands and then you're done.
How awesome is it, thankfully, that we actually have some successful, happy marriages at the end of this? Because
well, speak for yourself. I'm just kidding.
I don't know. You guys looked cute together last night. You didn't even get mad at her over the flat tires. She was worried about it.
Yeah, she thought I was going to be.
Which is a little you were totally cool. 3 years ago, you might have been.
Yeah, I might have. Yeah,
therapy helps. Maybe not. Yeah, like no, seriously, because like this is the sort of thing that could mess you up. It could start your, or I don't know. It's like war, and then you bond with your soldier, fellow soldier, and you make it through, and then you trust each other like never before. Maybe it's a really good thing I think Sarah and I used to say we felt like we were forged in fire, like as a relationship, and it makes you strong. Maybe, yeah. So I felt like. This was more on her shoulders than mine. I mean, I'm kind of suffering through it with her, but when it comes to like wedding planning, I don't care that much. I'm like, I've got some opinions, but I'm like, let's just do this thing, and start being married. No, seriously though, it's like, I don't care about this event that much. It's like, I care that she cares, but it's her family drama, like much more than mine. Of course, then I'm dealing with mine a little bit on I've got families showing up for this got brought up to me a month ago. A family member of mine was, she watched the first episode of the podcast, and she was just like, so tell me a little bit more about this. Like, she was like, because I knew when I showed up to your wedding rehearsal that there was this dynamic, something was, I was like, what did you know? I was like, tell me about, why didn't you say anything to me?
It wouldn't have mattered.
It wouldn't have mattered. I would have cut you off. I would have been like, well, you're outside the fold. You're going to hell.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have said that, but that's the internal response. We were taught, I learned from you guys with your family. It's like, I remember thinking, sorry, we're derailing here, but long enough in the church that my family in the faith had been mismanaging their family relationships who weren't in the same faith. Because you guys are like, no, we're drawing hard lines. We're cutting people off. And the Bible says, what is the scripture? Put someone out of the church and don't let, the principle taken away was don't let them think that you're okay with them, lest they be comfortable in their sin and go to hell.
My God, that scripture is triggering.
Well, that speaks very closely to the heart of all of your trauma, right? Mm-hmm. Sorry, didn't mean to go there.
No, my whole life I heard that, and that was a justification for cutting people off.
Man, which is, it's doing the exact opposite of what you're saying that you're trying to do.
Yeah.
It's so messed up. So there's a whole other episode to dive into. But point is I had a family member just a month ago watching the podcast and asking me about that. And I was like, and she was describing her perception of the dynamics of how she was treated walking in and how the show was being run and where the controls set. And I was just like, I can't believe one visit for an hour and you're catching all this and you're catching this sting, and she wasn't allowed to sit where she wanted to, or and there was this icy look, how dare you try to sit in this area of this table, some stuff that I know it seems like silly, petty stuff, but it's not. It's speaking to.
Well, if you aren't used to that and you walk into it, it's just
it's messed up if you are used to it. You know what I mean?
Well, it is, but you become conditioned to it, and that's just the way that it is. So you're not thinking about how bizarre this is.
Yeah.
Toby's like, I've never seen anything like this.
Do you not feel sometimes from Toby's perspective or something we're a freaking reality show that someone should be watching?
Oh, yeah.
And do you enjoy it all watching some of the reality shows? When Sarah and I first left, we watched Welcome to Plathville. And there were a couple other shows, I'll have to remember them now. Sister Wives with the Mormons and the polygamy. Obviously, polygamy is not a factor here, but just the control of a group and a narcissistic leader and the family dynamics and the enmeshment. And then Welcome to Plathville is an interesting one about, it's kind of like a family like the Duggars a little bit, I guess. And you can tell the parents, they're homeschooling all these kids, and these kids are high control. And then you watch them start to leave home, and the friction, just so much of the people's stories, different parts of it will resonate with you. And it's this is like therapy watching these other people's reality TV drama. I really feel like we're on a show. We are now, in fact, on a show. Thanks a lot, guys. Here we go.
No, but hey, Netflix.
Yeah. Oh, no.
No. I don't know if any of us actually would want that.
How much money do you make for Netflix?
Don't put that in the podcast.
Well, I don't know what your cut's going to be, but...
Yeah, so now you're married and you're part of the Lasiter family, the esteemed inner circle.
I used to be so excited about that.
Oh, okay. So let's hear about how you fell from excitement.
I think the excitement was already gone through the courtship drama. I think I'd already lost it. And I was just nervous as all get out.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, so I would like to preface that, I think, with a quick backstep into, obviously, I'm not a professional here, right? I've done a decent amount of therapy on the topic because of how it's impacted me and, personal research. But, I think you guys said this at the beginning of your podcast, right? Like, I can't diagnose your dad with something. Like, we haven't taken him to a therapist, right? And I have like genuine like empathy for like realizing to my limited knowledge of what goes into the forming of a narcissistic personality, right? And like that bad things happen to you, long story short, in a really bad way to trigger that evolution, for lack of a better word, right? And speaking on the stuff that we talked about yesterday, I would just like to clarify that I'm offering my perspective and feelings on how things affected me. I can't speak to anyone else's intentions or motivations, period. I just want to say that, like, for my conscience sake, like, I feel a little hesitant or bad about some of it now, like after our conversations this morning. But like, to answer your question, I was surprised. I think the facade, call it that if you will, of the Golden family, the Lasiters, because yeah, I mean, I moved up there, and it's what you want to be. You want to be a Lasiter. I'm not the only one that, and that's not why I married Sarah, for the record. It's really not. Like, that's not what I was thinking then. I was like blown away that she looked at me, right? It's like I told you yesterday, like, I knew she was out of my league, and who could ever be good enough for Sarah? I really meant that. So like, that was not a motivation. But I remember, like, I mean, I'm friends with Mattie, and like, I remember being bummed that I didn't get invited to more Lasiter get-togethers. Like, it was exclusive. You guys were like doing your family thing, and no one else gets to touch that to a degree, like only to the level that we allow it, to the level that it's portrayed to the church, like for the epitome. Like, Sarah's talked to me about y'all's childhood and worldwide, where it was like, it was big on your dad on, we are a standard family. Mm-hmm. We are the image of what you want to be in this church. And I'm ruling with a rod of iron to make sure that's what people are seeing, right?
Absolutely.
I've got inside information now, and been married for 10 years or longer. And
yeah,
like,
so I'm guessing you started discussing your childhoods in worldwide then.
So this is when I started. I didn't know. We were just weathering war during the like courtship engagement. On the way down the mountain from our honeymoon, a week later, I think something happened that I upset Sarah. Like, I responded to something a certain way. I think it was something relatively trivial, but I was surprised at how upset she was. Like, what did I do? And I'm inquisitive. I'm like, I want to figure it out, solve it, get to the bottom of this. And I think I started asking questions that ultimately led to, well, this thing just reminded me of my dad and this thing. That was my first moment where, like, now I'm digging. Actually, she might tell me I'm wrong and say that I started doing this while we were engaged. I feel like the first moment I remember was the poignant moment to me was coming down the mountain from our honeymoon, and something happened, and then it was a response of mine that triggered a memory of, like, this is how Dad would have responded, or it felt like this.
Oh, wow.
And so that was my first shovel into the earth of, like, let's uncover what's happening in life now. Why is stuff going this way, right? What's behind this? What's behind this? And I don't mean that to insinuate, like, there's a lot of weird stuff with Sarah that I needed to explain. It was just, things come up. Like, for instance, like, why am I like so insecure about like being skinny and underweight? Like, there's that came up in a therapy session 2 weeks ago. It's like, wait a minute, do you have a problem feeling weak? And I was like, yeah, this goes back to this bullying moment in my childhood and this thing someone said, and like formed my career. Like, I got into personal training, right?
Yeah.
Like, the gym became like my thing to an extent. So, stuff evolves as you know a person. You're like, well, what's the reason behind this? Like, I don't understand. So I started asking questions, right? And then I guess more to your point is like, what's it like walking into the first family dinner? I remember the first one is just like, man, we just went through all of this crap, family drama, like, to get together. And so much goes into that, like, for years, right? Like, some of the ins and outs on different sides of things. But nervous as all get out, like, showing up to the first exclusive. Like, I would have been excited about it 5-6 years earlier, but now I'm like, this is like a lion's den. Like I could get torn to shreds in here. Like, I don't know if I'm welcome, like who's not okay. Like I really thought, like you asked me before we started, like you weren't okay with me there. It's kind of was my impression. Not that you did anything terrible outwardly, like to make me think that, but I mean, it was pointing at Matt. We're on audio now, no camera. Sorry. Ashleigh definitely was not there. You were.
I'm absolved from this portion.
Yeah. You were already going to hell.
I was already like.
You were out.
Yeah.
I don't mean to say that flippantly. Like it's terrible.
Well, if you don't laugh, I mean, what did they say? You cry.
You're going to cry.
So.
You don't want to end up bawling. We've already ruined your makeup this morning.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was shocked. Like that's when I really started seeing deeper levels of like stuff we talked about yesterday, like the level of fear that exists around not crossing your dad, like not like you walk in and you are judging like I'd never known it before. I think like I knew it, but like now it's deeper, more nuanced, judging like how the night's going to go based on what kind of mood he's in, like what are we in for, or how harsh it seems he's treating his wife, right? Or Sarah wore something he didn't like to dinner one night and like took her head off like she was, I was going to say 5 years old, but I have a 6-year-old and I can't imagine talking to her the way my adult wife is being talked to by her father in his house. He didn't like the shorts. They were like some gym shorts that, didn't hit close enough to the knee or something. Sent her home to change before going to church. Like she was like, sorry, she might not like me saying this, but.
So this was at family dinner?
Yeah. Called her up
was
in front of
she
everybody.
wearing that to church too? Is that
It was just family dinner before worship service that night.
Yeah,
Okay.
we
Family dinner.
leave family dinner to go
okay, I
to the
understand.
church.
Family dinner is Friday night, an hour before we're going to rush over to church, and like everybody else better get out of the house.
I was going to say.
Before, right, so we're at family dinner, and Matt and Michael better go show up there. You finish eating early enough. Like, I'm seeing all this. Like, you better finish eating early enough to get over there before your dad is walking out the door, because he's going to stroll in at the last minute. Everything better be ready.
The pre-music better be playing. The lighting better be
just right.
Like, you got to make sure that you leave to get there however many minutes early to do that before he gets there, or you got problems.
It really is like he's like an all-star, like celebrity that's going to be walking in, and all my minions better have got my entrance right. It's kind of how it played out, right? I mean, it's crazy now, but you look back then and like you're just afraid of screwing it up.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking, like watching Matt and Michael, and I'm just like, thank God nothing's really expected of me tonight, except maybe you think about praying out loud, right? Because if you don't, then if enough people don't, then this whole congregation is displeasing the Lord. We'd get spankings about this regularly, right? Like the sermon the next day might be, I can't believe you guys don't love the Lord enough to pursue him hotly enough, his presence to, everyone should have been praying last night, and I'm falling asleep. Friday night services, like I get up early and I work all day.
It's dark.
The lights are out, like you're kneeling and I'm praying,
It's
like
9:30,
I'm bending over
10.
and then like my head, like I'm not a Lasiter night owl. I'm not raised with this stay up till 2:30 a.m. and sleep till 11. Like my parents moved us out into the country. We got up at 4:30 to get up to make it a 45-minute drive into town to be at school by 6:37, them to be at work. I was going to bed at 8 o'clock my whole life. And that hardwired circadian rhythm, I'm falling asleep with the lights out at 10 o'clock at night on these
How many hours
worship services.
Would the Friday night worship
2 or
service
3.
be?
I was going to say, was it that
We
one
would start at 7:30.
7? I think it was
7:30.
7 on Friday. Did they move it to 7 because it was like, well, 7:30 makes it too late for people the next morning? Either way.
7 or 7:30, and we could be there till 10:30 or 11
Oh, yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And then you're supposed to be back by 10 or
30
something.
next morning.
Morning.
Get there early if you've got responsibilities.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
Sarah's got to prep special music. Matt's got to have the sound system ready. Michael's got to have the incense burning. And, like...
Which I'll just add was and I was going to say like point of contention. Maybe that's not the right word, but it was an issue between Liz and I Because
she's late for everything and you got to get there.
And I'm time oriented in that way because I know
fear,
what's going to happen. So, if she wasn't ready, then I'm taking that anger out on her because
you're afraid.
I'm expecting to get hammered for it.
A lot of anger is born out of fear.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're angry about something, lots of times it's because you're like, I get mad if like something happens in my household and it makes me too scared.
Mm-hmm.
Like my first response will be like, I'm mad that you guys just freaked me out. Like I thought something was wrong. Like a laugh that sounded like a cry or a scream. And it's like, you're just playing or something. I've got a 6-year-old running around now. Or somebody steps on the dog and it screams and like, I'm PTSD response now.
It's like if something makes you feel vulnerable in some
Yeah.
way, then I will do that too. Like it switches to anger where it's like, well, now I'm mad at you.
Before you
made
know
me
it.
feel vulnerable.
Before you know it, the flash is like, I'm mad. You're like, wait, why am I mad? I shouldn't be mad. There's weird stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to that, I think.
Right. And so, but Liz is probably not comprehending your level of import on what happens to me if I'm late. Like you might could try to explain it or maybe you're not aware of it, but she's not going to feel that as deeply as you're feeling it. But no, but like if I'm going to like a Lasiter family get together, like I'm anxious.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, Sarah, can we please like be there 15 minutes early? And for Sarah, it's the opposite. She's like, if I'm there early, I'm extra anxious because then I've got extra time doing. And she wants to stroll in at the exact right moment. And I'm like, no, I have to feel like I'm ahead of the game. Like I'm sitting back. I'm not rushing to get there. I'm not stressed out. Like I can be my most collected if I'm early. Sarah and I are the exact opposite there, which now I understand why. Try to meet in the middle. But anyway, we've digressed from witnessing Friday night family dinners.
And then the service being late.
And and so like within the family, honestly, to answer your question, I'm going to fail you a little bit because it's not something that a bunch of specifics are jumping to my mind right away, except that you start getting more inclusive insight on the whisperings of, well, this is how stuff is working behind the scenes. Like this is who's talking to who about what, and so counseled with Pastor this week, and all of us are sitting around hearing about it and talking about it, and you're like, to some extent, you're kind of relieved because it's like, okay, now I'm on the end, like hearing this, but then like you realize that later it's like, well, this is what was happening to me, and it still will be. If there's going to be a family meeting to call somebody to task, to keep them in line, to exhibit some more control because they're not living up to what everyone else wants. Exactly right. Behavior is off track here, so let's everybody come down hard together. Like I'm seeing this stuff happen much closer up now. And then at some point, it takes a minute for it to sink in, but at some point you realize this isn't a good situation. Like what I thought about how this family was operating, well, and then it doesn't take too long of me digging privately with Sarah into like childhood to be like, wait a minute, this is not what I experienced in childhood and world. Well, not exactly. There's a lot of crossover, right? But this is something that the honor. I remember this moment or series of moments, like as it became a realization, like the honor and prestige, and like we were talking with your text from someone earlier this morning, like this level of extra blessing outpoured on the Lasiter children, and this respect owed to them, and level of haughtiness, or however it was put, arrogance, that's perceived from the outside, and envy, honestly. Mm-hmm. Like most people at a certain level of the church are seeing like envious of this great, loving, Christian, faithful family. Like, and you guys are just awesome together. Everything looks great from the outside. I remember realizing, I think myself, and then in conversation with Sarah, and I think Michael to some extent, that wait a minute, this badge that you guys get to wear, this privilege, it was bought with a great price. I remember realizing you suffered to get it. Like, so you might carry this, we're Lasiter children, level of privilege. Like, you probably didn't feel like it was privilege. Like, you're probably just feeling, I don't know.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I'm sure that it was to a certain extent. There's a little bit of that pride that you're like the model family, the model, you know, whatever.
You've been taught that.
Yeah. I do, not to like kind of get off track, but it fits with this. I remember, and we're going to talk about it in later episodes, but there were some people in the church in the later stages before we all left that I mean, the way it seemed is that they genuinely wanted to.
Oh, I know what you're getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. They wanted to be a Lasiter, essentially. And I remember thinking,
you don't know what the hell you're asking for.
Well, I thought like, no, you don't. Like you think you do.
I remember having
because of what it looks like.
I remember having that conversation with you and with Sarah, and I was like, they think they want it, but they don't have a clue what they're talking about.
No, like you don't.
And by that point, like to answer this question you asked me, like then I knew by that stage in the game. And before it was just like, no, you don't. I remember that moment where I was like, yeah, you've enjoyed some level of pride and prestige, but you bought it with a lot of suffering.
Yeah. And it's like you want the full brunt of this system, which we didn't know what to call it at that point.
No, we
calling
didn't.
it a family cult.
Right.
But we knew what the ins and outs of it were for the most part, and thinking like you don't understand that with that position, air quotes, comes this with it. And like you're looking at it from the outside and think, this is great. Look at the privilege that they experience, which is again true. But like you said,
and that's not to say the word privilege
cost.
almost implies like a level of like you get a pass for things, and
which I think some people did think that was the case.
I don't think I thought that, because that word implies that like you can get away with stuff.
Yeah.
Privilege. When I say that, I mean what I meant was like the text you showed me this morning of you're getting a greater spiritual blessing, like you higher honor. It's kind of what I mean by privilege. Kind of means like entitled, you know, like the connotation is anyway that like the same rules don't apply to you. And I know that some people thought that. I don't ever remember thinking that, because I remember thinking the rules are harsher. I think that was after I married in.
But I've heard some people call it was as if the family was royalty.
Yeah, well, that's the way they were treated. And that's the way your dad elevated it subtly. He didn't elevate it to the way that it would be obvious that it's grandiose and conceited and arrogant, right?
Really? Because I feel like he was.
Well, now it seems obvious, but like then
at the time,
no, it didn't.
Okay.
Then it was like,
I mean, if I like listening back to
like
pieces of a couple sermons, I'm like, oh my goodness, he's so grandiose.
Find how many sermons though where he was condemning flattery. Like so and so will tell me this, and I'm just like, I don't want to hear it.
No, but in the same
you know what I mean?
in the same breath, he's gonna say, "I've never lost a tennis match.
I know,
and I was the best at
it's duplicitous.
softball or whatever it
is.
It's kind of wild to hear that his actions
bizarre.
were very grandiose.
Well, looking back, I remember like so. The answer to your question is like it unfolded in stages and gradually. Like I remember realizing, wait a minute. Like I remember a comment, and this kind of starts speaking to some of the de-evolution there and the movement, but the comment from the lectern that, I've got Meniere's disease, and that's the worst thing the doctors say that you can live with. It's not fatal, like worst disease, like the most suffering. And I was livid, so livid. Like that's when it was just enough evolution over time where now I actually feel a level of safety in being angry and questioning like his Godhead authority, that I was, because I knew by that point, like the burden that was put on your mom with painful arthritis, right? Like serving him hand and foot all the time. And by that point, I'm way too far down my road of watching my wife suffer some serious health consequences, and just day to day life can be misery, autoimmune things, and like most heart-wrenching. So I'll rephrase then. The courtship stuff, not the most painful thing in my experience with all of it. The most painful thing for me is her pain that still continues. It is the most upsetting part. Like I would trade any amount of pain like I have to get through for her to be spared more. So the consequences of it all, and someone could disagree with me if they want, but like I am 100% convinced, and I think there's a lot of new science out to back it up though it's not widely accepted yet medically, is that trauma causes some serious health consequences. Like it can. Doesn't always for everybody, but it really can. Yeah, so I misspoke yesterday. Like that to me is the most heartbreaking, the most
because you're
infuriating.
out, but then you're still dealing with this.
What if
chronic,
it never goes away? You know, like it affects you, right? There are things.
Well, I mean, I have an autoimmune disease as well,
right?
And I attribute it to that.
So I can't believe I said that. I misspoke yesterday, but that is the worst part of it all for me.
Yeah.
Is watching somebody you love suffer. And like, I've watched that for Sarah, like that being the worst part for her. And well, not really, but yes, you know, and like being so concerned for your mom's sake and what she's having to deal with. So I remember being livid when he's going to be so self-absorbed blatantly to say something like me having this self-diagnosed problem that I'm not going to go there is worse, because I'm looking at him thinking at that moment, like, you might be the reason that my wife is suffering the way she is, like your daughter, your wife. Like I can't attribute blame, right? Like I can't divide it up. Like that's not right. But it's the feeling that I had. So that speaks to the level of delusion and grandiosity. And I don't know why we've rabbit trailed there.
I don't think it's a rabbit trail.
I mean, I don't know where I came from.
That is the family dynamic and what you started seeing.
Well, we got talking about like the perception of like the privilege and that changing for you, and then
Oh yeah, so
I came with the cost. Like,
yeah, so yeah, coming
and learning more about Sarah and her childhood, and I would be curious to know if you ever labeled, when you and Sarah spoke, if you ever labeled the things that she described in her childhood as abuse. Like, did you recognize it for what it was in that moment?
I wish I could say definitely yes. I'm afraid the answer is mostly no. Because there's still a lot of, it's weird because you're raised in worldwide, you've got this one perspective and some of the dysfunction there that carries over, and like your parents modeled certain things and you're just taught certain things by proxy, and the whole group is believing it, and so to varying degrees. And then I've submitted myself to his authority and bought into, he's hearing God's voice more intimately than anyone else, right? And so literally, yeah. And so, like, I mean, he knows he's got special knowledge, special revelation, special spiritual gifts, and the scriptures wielded to control about like how much authority that pastor had. Now I'm convinced were very twisted and very misconstrued, but it was a great lever on us, right? I mean, for me at least. I mean, I'm thinking for everybody, but so I'm still emotionally, subconsciously afraid to question him as like God's Moses-like servant, speaks to God face to face. He liked to quote that one, right? Like, as a man talks to a friend, so I talk to my servant Moses face to face. And then he has seen God face to face. So like there's control and manipulation there with all of these tactics, and I'm revering the fact and seeking that I would like to talk to God face to face. You know, you're seeking this level of spiritual attainment that he's got that I'm not reaching. No one else is reaching. So I'm still afraid to really question him as being like absolutely wrong or like a terrible guy, right? And I don't even want to say that now, like, you're a terrible guy. Like the binary thinking, you know, that we talked, like I'm hesitant now.
I think you can say he's done terrible things.
Yes, I will absolutely say that. I don't want to attribute it to character, you know what I mean? But yes, you've definitely done some horrendous things, and I'm mad. So yeah, I remember certain things that, you know, private things like Sarah would share with me that like broke my heart for her experience. And I couldn't believe it a little bit. I was just like, no way. Like, I can't imagine someone being cruel like that. And I don't want to give too graphic an image by using the word cruel. Like, I'm not necessarily talking about where your worst nightmare might go, you know, and I'm being veiled for, you know, her privacy's sake. And I remember, so here's one of my first insights into the family, right? I remember how scared I was well, this is way before Sarah and I coming over to hang out with my buddy Mattie at, his dad's house, and like us doing something in the living room and him saying, quit horse assing around. And like, he was pissed. And I was like, whoa, because my dad never said stuff like that to me. I'm not like, my dad's better. I'm not doing some comparison there, right? I'm just like,
It's culture shock.
Culture shock,
yeah.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, I was raised with an authoritarian. You do not disrespect your dad. You do as you're told, or, there will be some consequences that you learn to fear a little bit, right? Not abusive, but not at all. But there was culture shock even still, like, whoa.
Which I think this does speak to, I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, I don't want to get off track, but you're talking about your dad, where it's like the system of Worldwide and the offshoots created this culture within the family. And there were people like your parents, who I love, and who were abiding by that structure.
Yeah.
And then there were the few like our dad who was like, and then some more.
Right?
Yeah, that's
because
a good point.
It's a really good point, because the structure has its flaws, a lot of them, right? Like, maybe you can say all of it was just horrendous, like the whole religion terribly sucks, or maybe you can find some positives, like, to each his own opinion. But in sorting through that, like, the structure's creating some problems, like a dysfunctional, I think Worldwide was a cult, absolutely. I don't think any of us disagree there. So, like, my family comes up in it, and like there's a certain element, and I'm thankful for a lot of the ways I was raised. Like, I say this with, some gravity, like I look at the way without the binary thinking of these people are right, these people are wrong, but just by comparison, there are no boundaries and no discipline for some kids these days, and they're going off the deep end. Like, they can't live a life with any sort of responsibility. You know what I mean? Like, you see people that just can't get their stuff together. Like, they think everybody owes them something, like the world should just bow to me because I'm entitled, and there's dysfunction that goes if you go too far undisciplined. So I'm thankful for not y'all's level. I would not say that y'all should be thankful, right? But I'm thankful for a level of discipline instilled in my life that serves me well in a lot of ways. Has it given me some anxiety and some perfectionism and some issues to overcome? I think so, maybe. Who can say what comes from what, right? But the point is the system is flawed, and it creates these dynamics for people to live through, and maybe a really great guy takes it and implements it in his family in a less harmful way. Mm-hmm. And then maybe somebody that's predisposed to narcissism takes it and it really fuels a flame in a really destructive way that you guys end up suffering through as kids, right? I think that's a really good point. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always go super terrible for people, but it very easily can. Like, a cult doesn't always devolve into drinking cyanide together or crazy, like, ridiculous sexual orgy practices and, like, polygamy, and, like, you can go off some real deep ends. Like, who knows? Like, you're putting people in slavery. Like, there's indentured servitude, like with the service. Mm-hmm. We've talked about that some, how much you're expected to sacrifice and give, and the financial component. Like, it can go all sorts of ways. And of course we didn't think that was ever going to happen to us. We thought we were, think about all that you went through as a kid, but you still think we're in, like, the special, like, God's chosen, right? And then we stay in it long enough to see the control evolve to a whole new level. And I know we're not touching that in this episode. That's a whole series of episodes. Mm-hmm. But where things really started to escalate a few years ago, right before we left, to where, like, our minds are ultimately blown at, like, we could see this going all the level of control that was held and the level of things that were evolving. You could see where it all could have ended up in something you're watching in a horrific documentary.
Which I've thought about it since, like, it's akin to boiling the frog. You guys have heard that kind of that story where
slowly,
where I feel like the temperature was turned up too hot too quickly.
That's exactly how I think.
At that point in time.
Like, he overestimated his level of control a little too much and turned the dial. And I was like,
just so.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, he almost got it. Mm-hmm. Like, we were along for the ride for a bit.
Yeah.
Like, just recently, I've got a family member telling me, it's like, I was watching y'all services online or in person once maybe, and saying, like, the following of the procession, like him, like a god, like into the sanctuary with the song on repeat, like
flags
whipping us into this, like, frenzy. Like, it's documentary type stuff, right? Like this is getting so extreme, it's weird.
And if not for us separating during the pandemic, this is my
COVID-19 saved our lives.
Yes, I was going to say my personal belief, and I know my wife Liz feels the same way.
Sarah
I think
too.
Other people.
Yes.
If not for that break to kind of get a little bit of literal distance and mental,
emotional
perspective, I think maybe the heat being turned up to the level it would have worked.
I think so
if
too.
Not for that.
I think so too.
And I don't think we'd be sitting here today at all.
No, we wouldn't. What's crazy is like outside of our situation with this church and your family, other people in other walks of life have said similar things with some similarities and some differences, but just like it changed my life.
Yeah.
Like being shut down, like homebound, like taking me out of this circumstance. Like I literally feel like, as awful as it is for anyone that suffered with it, it saved us. I really think that it did. I mean, that moment that I remember, Sarah and I felt so guilty for a while, but like the level of peace we came to, not total peace, because your dad also was going off the deep end. Do you remember? I think he knew control was slipping because he started freaking out about some COVID regulations and beating us over the head via Facebook group posts that freaked me out. Like so-and-so was seen out not taking the rules seriously, and I'm out still cutting grass trying to provide for my family. I'm like, I shut my gym down like the government told me to, but like, I mean, I can't have zero income. Like, so I'm not seeing anyone. I'm on a yard in the fresh air, but like I'm still, and I remember being like so scared that like he's made this post that y'all aren't taking the rules seriously. Like this is a big deal. Like follow all the regulations.
Well,
like,
let's talk about, maybe we don't want to get into it in this episode, but why he was so intent on protecting himself from COVID-19.
Or was it about that at all? Or was it just about more control over us? Like I have no idea.
No, I know. What I'm assuming you're alluding to, Ashleigh, is the message that Dad said he received that the devil was going to try,
kill him,
intended to kill him, was coming for him specifically. And so that's at that time and now.
I never put that together. You might be right.
It's almost like Dad had this, like the devil said he's coming. Or the Lord told me that the devil's
afraid
coming to
he
kill
would
me.
use COVID to get him.
Yes,
I never put that together.
And maybe that's not the case, but
it's a good
what
theory.
I thought.
It's a good theory.
Well, because my question when I heard how strict he was why? He's God's elect. Like he's God's servant on earth.
I remember being
God's going to protect him in his mind,
I remember being so confused exactly like that. It's like, wait a minute. He's always preached this super miracle faith approach, like I had breast cancer, God just took it away, like this happened, like all these miracles. I remember thinking like, where'd all the faith go? Now we're terrified. Like he was kind of not anti-government, but very libertarian, right? Like we're like free and you can't tell us what to do, especially when it comes to our faith. And like I was shocked he shut the church down and he seemed so afraid. That makes more sense now if that theory is accurate. But I remember being blown away. I was like, where'd all the faith go that we're like, act as if like seas can't touch me. If I could catch it, God will heal me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's that. That's a whole nother story to get into, I guess, when we talk about the movement, right? But to your point, turned up the dial too quick. And if not for COVID giving us some space to breathe, I remember we didn't have perfect peace, but Sarah and I started feeling less fear week to week. We don't have to show up at church and deal with wondering how scared we have to be today about how so-and-so feels.
Yeah, the pressure got released a little bit. Yeah.
It was just enough of a breath to be like, wait a minute, life could feel less scary. Life could feel less controlled. We could actually be just doing our own thing all week and kind of enjoy ourselves a little. I mean, it was crazy. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that in a bit.
So I think we'll leave it there today. I know we're going to leave people wanting more, and there is more. But like we said at the beginning of this episode, there's there's more than can be gone through
with each person's story.
Yeah, there's just
Right.
too much. But we're trying to hit the highlights or lowlights, however you want to, however you want to
say that.
But
Depends on your perspective.
yeah, but I think we'll leave it for there today, and then of course we'll have Blake back on when we kind of get into a lot of the stuff we've alluded to with the 2019, like
What
the
came after
move.
COVID-19,
Yes.
during, and
yeah, kind of what we were talking
separation.
about there. So we'll have him back on, but we'll leave it for there today. And so just join us again next Wednesday when we release an episode.
And thank you so much for coming. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Thank you for having me, guys. I both enjoyed it and feel completely devastated.
I know it does take a physical toll, really telling these stories, but
I appreciate the opportunity, honestly, because like we were saying yesterday, is like some of this stuff, there's so much shame and guilt. Maybe not guilt, but yeah, like just taboo-ness to, like, you've had to be in hiding a little bit, right? And so honestly, I do appreciate the opportunity to come on and chat with y'all. It's been helpful to me. It's almost like a therapy session, right? Like just to get it out. Like I appreciate it. It's been good.
Well, we appreciate you.
If you like this episode of The Cult Next Door, please leave us a positive review and rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And don't forget to subscribe to be notified of new episodes.